Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to one of two panels we've got going today. This one is the Ask Me Anything panel. If you hadn't read that on the screen already, if you were looking for our inclusive working panel, I suggest you have a look in the Billier or River room at the other end of the building. I'd like to take a quick moment to again thank the wonderful sponsors that have helped put on D2D Perth this year. Without them, we really couldn't bring all these wonderful talks, food, everything to you here today. And with that, I would like to introduce you to today's panel. We have four wonderful speakers here today, and I will let them introduce themselves. You would have met some of them already, starting with Christina.
Hi. Oh, okay, there it is. Hi, I'm Christina Aldan. I am a brand strategy consultant based in Las Vegas. I work for Arona Software. I'm a speaker, trainer, mentor. I'm a soon-to-be author, and it's my first time in Perth, and I took a selfie with a quokka yesterday, so, I'm good. Whatever happens from there is amazing.
And next up we have Sam Price.
Hello everyone. I guess at heart I'm a bit of a techie, so I've had a lot of different roles in tech over the last 20 years. Software engineer, architect, manager. Now I'm currently a VP of engineering at Family Zone Cyber Safety. But super happy to be here today, and it's amazing to see such a turnout. So thanks everyone, and thanks to all the speakers and sponsors.
And next up we have Julie Grundy.
Hi there. Am I on? I'm on. My name's Julie Grundy. I'm a senior digital accessibility consultant at Entopia and head of audit practice. So for the last however long, I've been training people in accessibility, mostly dev teams, and auditing people, including some big corporations, art projects, everything in between. And in my copious quantities of free time, I also organise, part of organising the local Perth Web Accessibility Camp.
And finally, we have Sarada Lee.
Hi everyone, my name is Sarada, and I'm a co-founder of Perth Machine Learning Group. Our goal is to increase the capability of AI and machine learning in Perth. Our members have come from different background from government, academia, and industry. So we so far have over 2,800 members now, so hopefully continue to grow. I used to work in consultancy, helping company to do the AI work, and now I focus on medical research using computer vision for digital pathologies.
So thank you very much to our four panellists. My name is David Meacock. I'm your chair for this panel for the rest of the session here today. And I just briefly want to mention Slido, which is the platform that you can go to if you haven't already to interact with the panel today, ask some questions, have a look at the questions that have already been asked, upvote them, and that's the way that you can interact with these fine folks on stage today. But given that we only have half an hour, let's kick straight into it. And our first question, which I'm sure is very topical given the market at the moment, what's the software developer employment ecosystem like at the moment? If you're wanting to hire a full-time developer, do you recruit locally? Do you recruit overseas? Do you recruit remotely? Sam, you're a VP of engineering. You do a lot of recruitment. What's your take on this?
So I think it really depends on the size of the organisation and the maturity of the processes. So particularly if you were to consider at the really small end a tech startup, they're going to be very dynamic, and it's going to be a very fast-paced environment. So managing a highly remote or overseas, particularly when time zones are involved, workforce is going to be extremely challenging and not really lead to the business outcomes that are required at that stage for that institution. On the other hand, if companies like Google or any other kind of large organisation are more likely to have rigorous process in place and better support for people. So I think it's sort of a bit of a balancing act. So I think the larger organisations are going to be more readily able to remotely hire. And then I think, in the middle, there's probably a bit of a mix and a bit of a balance.
Thank you very much. On to an extremely popular question next. Should I add NFTs or crypto to my software project? Julie.
If you do it accessibly, I guess that's acceptable.
Sarada, Christina, I believe we talked about this last night. What's your thoughts on this matter?
I do a lot of startup advising, and I'm going to say what advice I usually give them. So, if you have something attached to somebody who's really popular, it's a celebrity, it's something like that, you can trade it, you can sell it, you can quickly turn it over while it still holds its value, then yes, absolutely. If not, then it's just too risky, especially for, like I said, startups who are starting these new projects or people who maybe don't even quite understand how data are transferred along the way and the lifetime and the sustainability of it. I have somebody that I worked with, in fact, he's like chairman of the board. They formed a NFT commission now in Las Vegas, and he's like chairman. And I put this art in here. Well, okay, but you put art for a famous artist that has significant value already. A lot of people that are coming to him are having issues because after people pass, they can't access their NFT, they can't access their stuff, and there's not a system in place for that, and that's a lot of money that's been lost. We also, in that same ecosystem, had a basketball player who took in like $2.5 million on their Discord server, and then one day he said, you know what? This is just really stressful. I'm shutting everything down. Anybody who put in $1,500, I'm just going to give you a signed jersey, and thanks for playing. And he took their $2.3 million and left. And there's no repercussions for that. And all of the kids that had looked up to him, who didn't have the money to invest in what he was offering, they invested it anyway because he's like their cool idol. He took their money and left, and those kids, they can't get that money back. So I think that if you can turn it over quickly, and if it's attached to something that's high value, and you can get that value and extract it, within 12 months or so, then it'd be worth it. Otherwise, I don't see the use for that. We have another startup who's trying to attach grades in schools to follow the child and their progression through to college, and I just don't think that's sustainable. The amount of energy and effort that's required to track all of that, it's not there. And I think it's environmentally irresponsible.
Awesome answer. Okay, another really big question. Where will machine learning have the biggest impact in the next 10 years? Sarada.
It's a very tough question. Even when we look back in the last couple of months, we have such a big breakthrough in generative area. So I even can't imagine how the world going to be in the next few months. So looking into, you can just type in a simple text message to describe the scene, and the computer can completely generate for you. And also recently just have an art competition, and the machine already beaten the human. So all these changes can be scary, and I think one of the speakers also talking about the deepfake. So I think we need to worry about the social impacts, what is real or what is not real. And for the longer horizons, I really want to see the medical research continue to improve and have a big impact for our health. I think it's more the regulatory to catch up the technology rather than the diagnosis on its own. But I really want to see that have a better improvement in our health system.
All right, thank you very much. I'm going to throw this next one to Julie. So what's the first thing that you look for when doing an accessibility audit? What do you do when you're building something new?
So if I'm just starting out a fresh audit, the first thing that I always look at is I open up DevTools and the Elements panel and I look at the quality of the HTML. That tells you a lot about where to pitch the rest of the testing and the verification, because good quality HTML is the basis of what goes into our accessibility API and then gets passed on to assistive technology. So you can learn so much from that part. If I'm testing, I generally test heading structure first because that has a benefit for so many people. If I'm building something fresh, I do again start with that HTML. We sort of sometimes talk about the accessibility stack being HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and ARIA. It's a purely front-end stack. And it's less of a stack and more of a pyramid, with HTML giving you so much accessibility for free that if you get that right, then everything else that you're doing is just enhancing and making more usable and extending to a wider range of people. But that bedrock, if I could give one piece of accessibility advice to people who don't have time to learn accessibility, learn HTML, really get into those MDN definitions and really get to know it really well.
Okay, thank you very much. I think this next one is a great question, and I might actually throw it open to the panel to see maybe if there's multiple insights on it. But how do you convince your company to care about privacy? And I assume from this perspective we're talking about the privacy of its customers.
I'm actually going to jump in here and say, without being a privacy expert, I have had experience with trying to get organisations to care about accessibility, which, along with security, is one of those things that seems a bit nebulous and fuzzy. And how do you know when you're doing it well? But everybody puts it off to care about later after they've shipped. We tend to go for, you kind of need a grassroots kind of level of support. And often that comes from one person taking it on and becoming a champion, but not telling other people off for doing it wrong, but more praising them when they get it right. And being a bit pesty in meetings about like, oh, yes, this is an accessibility issue. I assume you could do the same with privacy. This is a privacy issue. We should absolutely be thinking about this now. And then buttonhole the people in charge and harass them into caring because you will not leave them alone until they do. This sounds very informal, but it's been a winning formula for many large organisations. This is being recorded and being sent out, so sorry to my clients.
I can chip in a little bit as well because I deal with medical data, so it's inbuilt in the organization level. They're already aware the importance of the privacy. But from the development side, we also concerned about, we put it on the cloud service, where's the location, we share the responsibility, make sure we have the right access. So, and also reminding them, your boss, if they fail to do it, they will have a big fine from the GDPR. So, yeah, they will make the decision.
Yeah, that's great. I think it's a great. Oh, Sam.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, this is a kind of funny one, but I think, as Julie said, if you can hire someone whose responsibility it is to really focus on privacy and keep up to date, particularly from a legal perspective, and what that means to your organisation, and that's sort of a huge win. But then obviously getting executive support in that and really creating a culture. So privacy really is a cultural issue. So it's making everyone understand what it means to customers and what it means, like what's stored in data, and then rather than, I guess, to use a perhaps poor term, but rather than to bore people with legal jargon, it's really great if you've got that champion or sort of, I guess, ambassador to sort of relay what it means to individual teams and how that, like, provide simple patterns for how that they can approach privacy in their day-to-day work.
Yeah, Great input from all of our panelists there. I'm going to change gears slightly here and move more to individual development and the way that that's aligned in the market right now. What's the best thing that I can invest in outside of work to make myself attractive to an employer?
I do a lot of career mentorship for developers specifically, and about how to lead from within. And so an investment really is in yourself and making yourself look attractive. And the way that we do that is by helping other people and lifting them up. You build a community around you. You build a tribe of advocates for yourself. And so they're going to be allies, they're going to be supporters, they're going to be sponsors, and you become this brand that is essentially somebody who is a leader. Now, you already have a brand, whether you want to admit it or not, right? So as you're sitting in your team, you already are representing certain values, you are representing how you present, how you are showing up with your dress, your appearance, your attitudes. You already have a brand. The difference, of course, is that you're just going to be more intentional about that brand. So I would advise everybody to go home and think about your top 3 to 5 core values that make you tick, and then start making your choices, your decisions, start living your life around those core values. What's going to happen is you start to attract other people who share those core values. Those people like what you have, they want to start doing what you do. And in fact, they're going to lift you up when they recognize somebody else doing those things. Oh, you should go talk to Joe, because Joe does that, he loves that. You should go talk to Susie. Susie loves doing that. And so suddenly you start to create this brand for yourself. And then, decide to pick 2 different platforms to put that content out that represent your brand. Maybe it's TikTok, maybe it's Facebook, maybe it's just one-on-one speaking with people, because that's what works for you. Maybe you send out some press releases, I don't know. But you can create yourself as a brand, and you can lead from within. You don't have to be a leader, you don't have to have a title, because at the end of the day, you already have a reputation. So it's up to you to kind of guide those conversations and around that reputation.
Yeah, thank you very much, Christina. So let's say I've built my brand and I've got my job. So in Perth right now, salaries are, growing. There's certainly been a lot of heat in the market, so to speak. So I might throw this to Sam first, but is this just a bubble? Like, is this just a temporary thing? Should I be concerned if I'm an engineer in the market right now?
That's a good question. I don't have the crystal ball. I think there might be a tiny bit of a bubble, but realistically, my own personal take is that we don't really need to worry too much about that, but just rather focus on ourselves and focus on our work, and really make sure that we're being our best me's, and I think we'll be okay.
Okay. On a somewhat related note, so if you're a graduate and you're entering the market right now, it's obviously a bit different than how it would be a few years ago, even given COVID and remote work and things like that. Does the panel think that we're able to give grads enough support in their early years in the industry at the moment? Christina, what do you think?
I think that if your communication processes and the way that you're organizing in your teams is done well with diversity, equity, and inclusion, then that's not really an issue. People can still feel connected as long as we are creating systems that allow them to be connected in multiple different ways. And so having diverse voices that feel like they're being heard, if you have that already, then you don't have to worry about it. That's not really an issue. I have many friends who lead remote teams all over the world that have never even met in person, and they're very successful and they're very connected, and sometimes when they do meet up at conferences, they're besties, and it's awesome because they already are very familiar with what's going on in each other's lives. They have multiple ways for communicating, and the nuance in that has to be prioritized. The nuance of communication has to be prioritized through documentation, through multiple ways of communicating, and through respect.
Okay, great answer. I might throw the next one to Sarada. If I'm an application developer but I want to move into working with AI or ML, how best is it to make that move? How do I start?
Now the accessibility actually really low. You don't need to pay for anything. From the resources you want to learn from to the compute power, there is no excuse not to learn. And I can point you to a Perth Machine Learning Group, and I follow FastAI as well. I did it myself, and I continue following. I just enjoy every moment. All the new technology, what I can apply for. It's just so exciting. The world is changing so fast, but in a good way. So come and join us or chat with me afterwards so I can point you to some resources. And FastAI is fantastic community, and there's a lot of opportunity to contribute to open source environment, so it also can help you to prepare yourself for your next move.
Okay, I think the next one is probably a good one to throw over to, well, anyone on the panel really, but I might start with Julie because we were talking about flying around the place last night. A number of the panelists here have, flown around the world and talked in various cities. Jacob asks, is the Perth technology sector lacking anything in particular compared to the eastern states or overseas right now? Or is, in the era of remote work, is that not really an issue?
Yeah, we were talking about this last night. I'm incredibly biased on this, though, in that I don't think that the Perth sector, if there are gaps, and I'm sure people can identify them, I don't think that there's anything lacking in our capability or our capacity to grow and fill those gaps. In terms of working remotely, Intopia is a fully distributed organisation, so I'm the only employee in Perth, but we have people all around Australia, in New Zealand, in America and in Canada. And in general, we've found the quality of people that we find to be pretty similar all around. So again, I'm the only one in Perth until Loren came to visit us. So yeah, I might be incredibly biased on that, but I do think that there is a lot of strength and a lot of resilience and creativity in Perth. So if there's any particular language sets or skill sets that are missing, I think that's just a case of, okay, fine, we identify them and we fill those gaps. But I'll pass over to people who are possibly less biased.
Yeah, I think it's sort of just a function of our population, really. So I think we've got everything, just in smaller amounts. And so, I don't know, DDD for me is one of those little sparks in the Perth sort of tech scene. I'd love to see more investment in tech and more startups and growth here and more conferences like this one. But yeah, I don't think there's any fundamental lack of skills. I just think it's just a function of us being comparatively small and in a relatively isolated part of the world.
Okay, so we've got about 5 minutes left. I'm going to jump around to a few fun ones here that I've got on the list. What's a boring technology that people or companies should use more? Forget about Web3 and blockchain for a moment. What's something boring we should look at?
I'm raising my mic to my mouth to get in first. HTML. It's the handy-dandy, go anywhere, do anything kind of Swiss Army knife. As far as boring tech goes, HTML is actually pretty bloody great.
Okay, I'll throw out one. Any of the languages that are used for infrastructure as code, so CloudFormation, does anyone like YAML? HCL for Terraform. I don't know. I'm probably going to get murdered by a few people after this, by the way. Those kinds of things. But we need to do more infrastructure as code.
For me, I don't like SQL. So I know people will disagree with me, but for me, when I have an interview and people ask me my skill or SQL, and I can do other things using other language, and I don't like SQL. And also, it's an indicator for me that will be a very boring and very dirty job. I am more doing the cleaning more than doing the machine learning. So SQL for me is the dirty word.
Okay, has anyone got a fun war story to share from the last year?
In what context?
Not any that my clients would be happy for me to have recorded.
Many war stories, but none that are fun.
I think we've all been there. Okay. Well, here's something that's a little bit different. What is the meaning of life as a developer in your eyes? And bearing in mind that we all know that the answer is 42, what else do you think the meaning of life as a developer is? Christina?
Yes, I'm super excited to answer this. I work really, really hard with my mentees to teach them creative problem solving because it's all about critical thinking and solving problems. A lot of times, the people that I work with just enjoy working on things and chewing on things, and a lot of times they like the accolades as well. And for me, I try to help shift them to the empathetic side, right? I'm the emotional intelligence woman, so I'm always looking at how we connect our products and services with empathy, with kindness, and with innovation to the people that are using them. And I try to impart into people that those creative problem-solving skills, those thinking skills that often come so naturally to people in our industry, they're very, very valuable, and you can sometimes just take that for granted because you're surrounded with other people who are doing that. But if you think about those problem-solving skills that you have and how you can use the tools to really work on solving some of these difficult, challenging problems of the world, that has a deep and greater purpose.
That's a fantastic answer. So I'm gonna end on one. I'm gonna ask each of our panelists this question because it is the most popular question left on the app right now. We've covered a little bit already, so I'm gonna riff on it a little bit. So the original question asks, what's the hype with Web3? It feels like it's a waste of time and money and has no value. I'll extend that a little bit. One of the things we get criticised about as technologists is we get distracted by the next sort of shiny thing. How do we distinguish the next shiny thing from something that actually has value? How do we actually dig in and understand whether that has value? Sam, I'll start with you and then we'll go around the panel.
It's a very good question. I'd like to believe that everything has value and that the current form is likely to change over time, but there are some underlying principles, and so it's really just finding that sort of almost like product market fit where there's an evolution. And so what we see now might be hard to really understand what it's going to look like in the future, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see something that resembles not the Web3 of today, but a particular application going forward. But certainly right now I can understand why people would be feeling a bit dubious about it.
I definitely agree with Sam about the product and market fit and then adding value to the problem, but that means we really need the domain expert to understand the problem and apply the technology. Technology should be a secondary rather than the primary. We should always focus on solving the problem and add value to the situation. The tech is shiny, and next day they will gone. So even the language we learn today may be not applicable in a couple of years. So don't hang on to the technology, focus on the problem and solving it.
I think there is a small part of the community that is going to enjoy spending time with their goggles on, right? There are already people in the metaverse who really like certain things, and that's where they find connection, and that's great. And it's a certain subset of the population. And so I think for that, it does have value, right? For people who it's valuable if you have skins, if you can buy certain things, if you can have, okay, yeah, we want to put some effort. I can understand how companies want to do marketing within the metaverse and stuff like that. I get it, but you know, the reality is that it's like 10,000 people own a third of the crypto, and I mean, at that point, and there's something like 50% of the wallet keys are lost. Like, you never will ever see them again. And so with that level, there's really, it's not really practical for like me. What's the motivation for me to get into that when there's 10,000 people who are already going to hold it? There is a small percentage of the population that's holding it, and then what happens is we end up having all of these other kids again who can't afford it. This is and they're spending a lot of money and they're doing it wrong. You can do it right, though. I have mentees who paid off their mom's entire house. It was, you know, they had a $65,000 mortgage loan, and these kids paid it off playing esports games. They're amazing. I have other people who are using it to their advantage for testing things or for training during remote teams. You know, that's a good use of it. Will it take over our future? And oh my gosh, everybody's going to be into this, and we all have to jump to the next shiny thing? No, I don't think so. No.
I tend to agree with everybody here. My own thinking on this is very much about how when I first started learning to make websites, it was very much like I can make a thing and put it out in the world, and other people can just show up and look at it, and we don't need Rupert Murdoch's permission to do so. A lot of the extra hype comes from people inserting themselves as a middleman in a process so that they can extract a profit. I think the real longevity and promise of computing and software and the internet comes from those underlying patterns and principles of openness, transparency, interoperability. And so if those are the patterns and principles that you're working with, and then you learn a language that lets you work with that to solve the problem that you have, and then some business people can come along and think about market propositions or something. Maybe that's just, I'm just too much of a nerd to care about that. I'm lucky to have one of my bosses cares about that very much, and he thinks about that, and I don't have to worry about it. But I think if anyone is thinking about getting back to that question about how do you decide between what's worth your time learning versus what's going to be a flash in the pan, I think I will recommend a talk given here in Perth a few years back at Mixin called Full Stack Anxiety by Joel Khalifa. And I found that talk really useful to me in mapping out where I am now, the goals I want to have, the kinds of things I want to build, and what skills do I need to learn to reach that goal. So if that's for anyone, it is on YouTube, and you should be able to get a hold of it. So maybe if that's a concern for you, give that talk a whirl.
Thank you very much. Well, with that, we have run a couple of minutes over, so it's time to break and find our next sessions. But I would ask first that the audience gives our panellists a big round of applause. So thank you, everyone. That concludes our panel, and our next sessions will be starting at 3:15.